On this episode of the Dairyland Initiative podcast, we're going to be talking about dairy cattle welfare. Hi, I'm Courtney Hallbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook.
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in. Well, we've kind of got stuck there for a moment on what other topics we should cover in the Dairyland Initiative podcast. And then you've been giving some lectures, Dr. Cook, for our third-year veterinary students. And one of the very exciting lecture topics, and
thrilling.
Hopefully,
all those students really think this is a thrilling topic.
Yeah, and you didn't scare them off. I hope they came back for the next lecture.
Tried not to, but I actually can't believe. What are we on, number 36 or something like that? How many episodes? And we haven't talked really about animal welfare.
And apparently our slogans for the Dairyland Initiative is welfare solutions for a sustainable dairy industry. And yet we haven't talked about welfare. So
we haven't.
Let it rip, Dr. Cook.
All right, we're going to talk about animal welfare.
Yippee.
Contentious topic.
And differences between where you are within the world.
We are going to make some comparison between events in Europe and then events in the US. I think we've kind of arrived in the same place, but through different approaches.
Okay.
So we're going to go all the way back, way back into the 1960s. 1964 in the UK. The publication of Animal Machines by Ruth Harrison.
Yeah, that does not look like a very attractive cover for promoting animal welfare.
A fairly typical 1960s type hardback edition with a little weird kind of picture there. But that was the first time, way back, but it was the first time the words factory farm
entered into the public sphere.
Mm-hmm. So there's great growing concern about these production agriculture getting bigger and what that meant to the animals. And so Ruth Harrison raised those concerns. And at the same time, Astrid Lundgren
from Sweden.
Yep. Author of Pippi Longstocking, which I haven't read. She was raising concerns in Sweden and along similar lines through the 1980s. And so that really led to more of a sort of legislative approach to animal welfare. And I put this document here because this is the key UK document. This is the Bramble Report.
Ooh.
So in the UK, everybody knows the Bramble Report. And it's this Professor F.W. Rogers Bramble. And basically kicked off because of animal machines and was the starting point of something that you'll find very familiar to you, Courtney.
What's that?
The 5 freedoms.
Ah, yes. This gets swung around a lot at different welfare conferences.
This is the UK Farm Animal Welfare Council, finalising the late 70s now. This is 1979. The 5 freedoms. Freedom from hunger and thirst, thermal and physical discomfort, pain, injury and disease, freedom to express normal patterns of behavior, and freedom from fear and stress. Those are the keys.
And they seem like they're easily achievable.
Well, for years and years and years, they form the backdrop of the way we approached animal welfare, how we thought about it, but also the early animal welfare audits, assurance programs that really started off in places like the UK and other parts of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and those were really kind of went hyperspeed when BSE struck the UK. Because the industry needed some way of assuring the public that everything was okay.
Yeah.
Bovine spongiform encephalopathy through the early part of my career, late 80s into the 90s, farm assurance programs were really kicking off very strong through that period. But it was a little bit different in the US because while Europe, particularly the Scandinavia countries, were following this sort of legislative approach to animal welfare coupled with assurance programs, we don't really have a lot of federal laws to govern the way animals, production agriculture is housed and managed in the US.
And pros and cons of that.
Yeah. I mean, you're relying on people in suits sat in an office, making decisions about agriculture versus, potentially, hopefully, people that are doing it every day. You can kind of see some flaws in both approaches here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's different. And you have to kind of accept that our approach has been different than was seen in Europe. The discussion on animal welfare, frankly, didn't start very much in the US until about 2008.
I'm guessing some animal activist videos.
Animal activist video and a California slaughter plant. And it was pretty bad. Some egregious animal handling, down cows being dragged off trailers. But I like to say I used to do cow comfort talks before 2008, and then I did animal welfare talks after 2008. That's how dramatic it was. It really had a very big impact. It actually had a very positive impact if you think back, because it led to veterinary organizations getting together and working out, what are our position statements on moving down cows. It led to some changes in the way slaughter plants operated. Mm-hmm. So it was actually a positive, and we'll come back to the impact of some of these undercover videos. But that was the start, 2008. And undercover videos have become part of animal welfare discussion in the US.
Yeah.
They've been a very powerful conduit for these activist groups. They're well funded. They probably have an agenda. But we experienced one in 2013 in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think I had just started at the Dairyland Initiative, and this happened, and our social media pages just blew up with a bunch of negative comments.
Yep. And, you could only really call that waterboarding, spraying water in a cow's face down in the parlor, dragging a cow out of a free stall, dragging her by the head, hoisting them up with these hip hoists. They're really only to be used for support, not to actually haul the animal. So that was pretty bad. Good things that happened. A lot of whole improvement in down cow management in that region. Vet practices having float tanks. Mm-hmm. So raised awareness, made lots of good improvements. North of the border, our friends in Canada, it didn't hit them until 2014, but they had the big undercover video in Chilliwack, British Columbia, which really led to our major sponsor and supporter over the years, Saputo, something positive for the industry to improve animal welfare. Florida, 2017, you can kind of see the pattern here, the big Fair Oaks crisis in 2019 and 2023. So it's become a kind of regular backdrop of our work with the dairy industry, of activist groups taking undercover videos and launching them. Every now and again, just to have that impact factor. Positives have come from it. That's kind of the reality of realizing what's happening there. Yes, they may have a hostile agenda against animal ag, but they've also kind of led to quite a few improvements. And the way they do that is they influence our consumers. Yeah. Consumers of dairy products hear, read, see these images, and there's a mechanism to exert pressure on the brand names. The brand names don't want to be associated with bad stuff. Mm-mm. And so they have stakeholders, they have social media, they have different ways that they are influenced by the consumer, in inverted commas. In different states, there are propositions. California has sort of a mechanism for consumers and voters to impact things. And the brand names in this country create expectations for the supply chain.
Yeah. Totally.
And that is enacted by those that represent our farmers. So in this case, National Milk Producers Federation have been heavily involved in NPF, but also the co-ops and other aspects of the supply chain. And change happens.
Yeah.
And it has happened. And it happens quite quickly.
Yes, it does.
So, that's kind of the US backdrop. And now it's interesting. We're starting to see the same thing in Europe and parts of here, the UK. Panorama is the sort of big undercover TV show that pretty much everybody watches.
Is it like Dateline here in the US?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. Isn't that a dating show?
Oh, my gosh.
I've never watched it.
I know. I'm going to have to assign you some homework, Dr.
Okay.
Cook.
All right. Well, Panorama is the equivalent in the UK.
Okay.
So when they did an undercover video on a an expose of poor treatment on a dairy farm, that created a lot of backlash, and again, the industry has to respond to that. And how does it respond?
Well, it comes up with audits, right?
Yeah, it
audits.
comes up with this kind of self-regulation mechanism. And so this has been repeated over and over. In the US, it's called the Dairy Farm Program, Farmers Assuring Responsible Management. It's run by an NPF.
And then the Canadians have their own program.
They've got ProAction. So you see the little maple leaf there? See it? Kind of a cool logo.
Yeah, it's cool.
So they have ProAction. And those programs basically cover in each of those regions about 99% of the milk supply. And so that's how the industry responds. So the animal welfare conversation in North America, because it's responded so frankly quickly to those kind of pressures, I feel like we've caught up. And in some cases, we've surpassed what Europe's been doing. Europe doesn't have quite the same farm audit programs as we do.
Yeah. But it's got the legislation.
They all need to be better, by the way, but they have the legislation to back it up. We have consumer pressure as it kind of works through the system. So just to give you an idea of that evolution and how fast it can happen, this is the Dairy Farm Program, and it started 1 year after that undercover video in California. So in 2009, they launched version 1 of the farm program, and it was voluntary. Can you imagine?
Wow.
I think if they'd have made it mandatory straight away, I think there would have been huge pushback.
Yeah.
But it was voluntary, and it used an existing program that was already out there, so people were kind of familiar with it. And so it started. And then version 2 started in 2013, and that was mandatory. So now, again, working through the co-ops that are sourcing milk from our farms, now it's a requirement to become part of this program. And it had some voluntary action plans, kept most of what was happening in the early days, but had this phase-out plan for tail docking. And we'll return to this in a moment. The US was a country that relied on tail docking.
Yeah.
We did it because we thought it kept cows clean and milkers safe. And the phase-out plan was basically, the audits runs to 2016. The farmers had till 2022 to phase out tail docking. So a pretty long lead-in
long
time
window.
there. Virtually overnight it changed. So part the way through this program, it moved to January 1, 2017 and stuck. So by the time version 3 started, which was in 2017, there was already this accelerated plan to stop tail docking.
Yeah.
And I can maybe speak to why that was. But in version 3, now we have an advisory panel with animal welfare experts. I actually served on the panel for versions 3 and 4, but great people around the industry, animal welfare scientists and veterinarians were involved in, frankly, making these programs better, realizing the difficulties of them. You go to a 1,000-cow dairy, you can't take 5 days to do the audit.
No.
You have to make them, practical, reasonable. And there was very much a focus on outcome measures, so lameness, hock lesions.
Animal-based.
Yeah, animal-based. We weren't focused on the process, we were focused on the outcome. And so we weren't worried whether it was a tie stall or a free stall housing system. We were worried about how many lame cows you had. So
Makes sense.
that kind of thing. And this was the first time here in 2017 you saw what we call mandatory corrective action plans. So things that we absolutely required. So there was training, developing a VCPR, having a written VCPR with your veterinarian of record, the tail docking phase out. And then we also had continuous improvement plans, what we call CIPs. And those were things like just getting better at lameness, getting better at hock lesions.
Showing improvement.
Developing a health plan and so on. So you start to see there's a bit more teeth developing here.
Yep.
But it's getting a bit more serious. And with that, there was a mechanism to put farms on probation and suspend them, which had an impact on their ability to ship milk.
Yeah.
Version 4 instituted right at the start of the pandemic, so 2020. So launch was slow, and for that reason, you kind of see there's a 3-year revision plan here. That one took 4 years just because of the pandemic. And in that, there was increased accountability, shortened MCAPs. So we got serious about pre-wean calf handling, more training. CIPs were now 4 years, so for pain management, for disbudding, things like that.
Yeah.
And the probation suspension was more well developed. There was a clear 60-day conditional certification, decertification pathway. So if you saw sort of willful abuse on an audit day, for example, that was pretty serious. You had to do something about it. And then in version 5, we've kind of actually seen not so dramatic changes in the most recent version. That's the one we're under right now through since 2024. Different protocols, more pain control requirements, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's the evolution of one program, the dairy farm program. ProAction is a little different because they don't have a sort of 3-year revision. They have a 10-year timeline. So when they develop what they're going to do, it lasts for a longer period. And so with ProAction, you tend to see bigger leaps. This is kind of a more gradual shift. 3 years, 3 years, 3 years. With ProAction, there's kind of
big.
It's a bigger leap, yeah. So just to return to that topic of tail docking.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting. You left us on a cliff.
I left you on a cliff there. So it changed from stopping in 2022 and it suddenly shifted to 2017. There was a lot of research being done around that time, which basically said, and it's summarized in these pictures, cows with and without tails get dirty, and cows with and without tails are clean. The tail doesn't seem to have a major impact.
Yeah.
And so all of the veterinary organizations had a statement basically saying that tail docking wasn't supported by the science. And this is AABP's statement from 2010 back here. So we knew this quite a long time ago. But it's still hung on in the industry. Farmers believed it did something, and tail docking was a problem because it's one of those, I like to think about animal welfare conversations of whether it survives the kindergarten talk.
Yeah.
If you can go there and explain yourself to a group of young kids, it probably is good. Tail docking be one of those where the science didn't back it. The reality was we were removing tails without good reason, and it doesn't look great.
No.
So I think what really happened and why it accelerated was, again, the brand names, that there was pressure exerted and said, we want to leave tails on cows.
Yeah.
And now, it's 2017, so there'll be the occasional cow that's still in a herd.
Yeah.
Because they were docked when they were a heifer before that point. But now we have tails on cows, and what's happened to our somatic cell count and udder health since then?
Everything seems to have improved.
It's got better. So I think it bears out the reality that tail docking was kind of not the major thing to improve health and welfare. So getting rid of it's been a positive. Animal handling was always a theme of those undercover videos. So poor handling, poorly trained people, they don't know what they're doing, they get frustrated, cow goes down in the parlor, a big 1,600-pound cow decides not to move. You can somewhat understand why a stick comes out, why a hose comes out,
why people get frustrated.
And it needs training. You don't inherently know how to move a cow around. You have to learn how to do that. Point of balance, flight zones, pressure. You have to teach that.
Yeah.
And as an industry, we've got that message that we have to train our staff better to do that. We've also, seen these documents where it's basically an ethics agreement that workers are on board with, making sure that they're conscious of these issues and they're part of solving the problem. But you have to help those workers. You have to train them. And training has become such a big part of the farm program. Yeah. The down cow never looks good. They always go down in the worst possible place on the farm. This poor old cow's down in a corner of this collecting yard, covered in manure. AABP put its handling statement together. It's tough to do. How do you move that cow?
Yeah.
It's not easy to move a 1,600-pound cow.
When
you don't drag her by the head.
Yeah.
You try really hard not to do that. What you do is you tip her into the bucket of a skid steer or loader, and you carry her to straw-bedded pack, you have a nice bed of straw, you deposit her with food and water, and you maintain her in that place. And so we have a document here, position statement, and at this time AABP was really charging ahead of setting its standards. This is what we expect. And so we have these position statements that tell farmers what we expect of them. And even then, undercover videos would shoot video of a farm doing exactly what we asked them to do.
Perfectly.
But showing it in a bad light.
Yeah.
Because putting a cow in a bucket
just never looks good.
It's not elegant.
No.
It's not pretty. And so, but we have improved the handling of our down cows, and particularly that undercover video in Wisconsin led to a number of practices being much more involved in down a cow management. And we have a float tank in our own hospital, and cows come in, they get floated, they basically confined, and the water allows them to stand, and it can help them recover from going down in this kind of situation. And so I think our handling of non-ambulatory cows has improved over the years as a consequence of raising awareness, but also through these animal welfare audits. And then from our perspective,
from the facility side,
we're all about trying to make it easier for people to move cows around. And so having a bud box like this designed so that you don't have to shout and whack cows. You just take advantage of cows' normal behavior. You trap them in a little non-return pen so that they are up against a dead end here, and then just walking up and down, those cows will turn, and they like to go back from where they came from, and they just get redirected into this chute, and so they load up ready for hoof trimming.
But again, it comes down to the personnel training. So you can give
You've got to be trained to use it, but you've got to also have the facilities that help do that. Another undercover video highlighted the lack of pain management. So AABP again put down what the standard of practice is for castration, for dehorning, disbudding, and the use of pain control. And this one is still north of the border in Canada. They're requiring a Cornwall block, a local anesthetic block. We still don't require that. We require some pain control for our animal welfare audits. I think it's still an area we're in the sort of can do better categorization. But it's also a point that really shows the difference between Europe and the US. So the US, we're pushing through changes through animal welfare audits, through mandatory corrective action plans. In Europe, this is legislated. Okay, so you have to use a Cornwall block. It's the law.
Yeah.
So you don't get to do it. You'll be breaking the law if you don't use a local anesthetic block.
Yeah, that's definitely
big
a
difference. Yeah, big difference. And now we've left tails on cows.
But
we got another problem.
Another problem has cropped up.
Yes, occasionally you'll go to a farm and you'll see broken tails, little notches in tails. You see the deviations here. Animal handling again, of not using the tail as a rudder. You can use the tail in certain situations, but you don't use it excessively, and you don't bend it to the point that you'll see a break in the tail. And so you have to monitor these things, and it's become part of
animal welfare audits.
The audit assessment is to measure those broken tails and have that conversation about animal handling as a result of it. It's easy to stop doing something that we deem bad or not necessary, but it's really hard to change management philosophy and some of the dogma. There was dogma associated with tail docking that we had to change. So this is kind of where we're heading with animal welfare auditing, that we've been very much focused on outcomes. Again, lameness, hock injuries, knee injuries here, broken tails, they're outcomes that are not necessarily easily measured, but they're visual. You can kind of see it. You can create a scoring system and monitor it.
And it is seen throughout various types of farming management.
Yeah. And systems. Whether it's a tie stall or a free stall or a dry lot dairy, you impose the same standards. What I see us transitioning to, and I think there's a trend towards, is more process-based assurance. And to a degree, I've fought back on that because, if the farmer manages their system well and gets the right endpoint, surely that's okay. Let's focus on the endpoint rather than the process. But there are certain processes now that are under scrutiny. Okay, and I think this follows changes in the animal welfare conversation. So they started off with the 5 freedoms. They were mainly thou shalt not.
Yeah.
They were kind of, let's avoid bad things.
But now the change in philosophy has been, let's make things
Let's
better.
provide good things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this comes back to how we define animal welfare. And with that, this is another version looking at 3 things. Is the animal functioning well? Is the animal feeling well? First time we've got into sort of animal feelings. 5 freedoms had normal behavior. Now we're kind of, is the animal feeling well? How do we know that?
How do we measure that?
And then the third is the animal able to live a reasonably natural life. So those 3 things kind of represent a transition, a different way of thinking.
Different way of thinking, and also how do you define those things?
Yeah, much more difficult. And this is another version, and a shout out to Jennifer Van Os for putting these slides together. This is from Meller and his work, looking at what we call 5 domains. And some of these domains we get are really comfortable with, particularly as a veterinarian. Health, nutrition, environment, behavior. Right up our street, Courtney.
Perfect. I like this.
Those are 4 domains. The 5th domain is affective experience, mental state.
Again, how do you define that?
Yeah, minimizing bad things, for sure. Pain, fear, panic, stress, all those things. But now promoting good things, comfort, contentment, satiety, pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, again, an evolution of how we think about animal welfare. And I like to refer to this list. This is called the list of things that keep me up at night as we worry about things happening in the dairy industry. I've done a number of presentations with our good friend Jen Walker and Nina von Keyserling and Cass Tucker, and we've done this at a number of meetings where we kind of list, okay, what are we worried about here? Animal handling, painful procedures, lameness, hock injuries, down cows, broken tails. So those are all the sort of outcome-based things, kind of easily measured. But then you start getting into killing surplus calves, timely euthanasia, overstocking, restriction of movement in tie stalls, lack of pasture access for grazing, calf housing in isolation versus groups, calf feeding, the relative underfeeding of milk, transportation, cow-calf separation. So we're starting to see a shift. Now we've knocked off some of the easy stuff. Now the focus is shifting to these processes. And I see, perhaps not terribly quickly now, but a transition in terms of where we have to put our emphasis and our focus. And that's a little bit uncomfortable for a vet like me. Yeah. Because we are taught to improve animal health. Yeah. That's the thing. Pathology, disease, treatments, prevention. That's why I focused. How I got into this was lameness. You get in through animal health, but there's also the realization that in the oath that we take when we become veterinarians, it says that that we should be protecting animal health and welfare. So welfare is in there. Yeah, it's right there, and we're not trained in animal welfare science very well. The curriculum's pretty big. You talked about the lectures. I give one lecture on animal welfare.
One welfare
this
lecture.
Is it. There are animal welfare scientists that do degrees on this. So they have lots more training related to these different things. And I see that when I'm working alongside animal welfare scientists. I put a lot of emphasis on health. Yes. Perhaps outweighted emphasis in the preservation of health. I won't entertain certain things because I know that, it might increase the risk of disease. And when you're working with animal welfare scientists, they don't do that. They view those risks, related to affective state just as important as health. So they're worried about health, but they don't make judgments based on one thing over another. They try to look at it across the board.
Yeah, so there's got to be a common ground somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all come to a compromise, we hope. And so, again, Jennifer put these slides, and I really like this in terms of communicating that we're not just avoiding bad welfare, poor welfare. So we're, with our training, with our improvements to personnel on farm, hopefully we can avoid seeing anything related to cows being hit with sticks. But then there's the provision of a brush in a pen,
which allows enrichment, gives her
cows
pleasure.
like brushes.
Yeah.
It gives them, you talk about how you measure it. Well, you can measure it to a degree. You can do preference testing and things like that. But just look at a cow on a brush.
She's so happy.
She is so happy, Courtney.
And apparently people who watch cows use brushes are also very happy.
We did an Associated Press release way back, and we wanted to talk about comfortable stalls and cooling. And the cameraman that was out with us on a farm shot this video of this cow on this brush. And
and that's what took off.
That's what took off. This is a Huff post on, that's about 1.4 million views. Oh, cow there just rubbing herself, Do you need science to tell you that that's a good thing? Probably not. It just looks good.
Yeah.
And indeed, if you actually read those comments... never read comments on social media posts.
That will keep you up at night.
Probably a bad thing to do. But actually, you could see the turmoil of these HuffPost readers and watchers trying to work out a bad scenario where a farmer gave a cow a brush.
Yeah,
it's impossible. It's impossible. A farmer is buying something, putting an enrichment tool in the pen because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. It's a good thing. And so consumers are sensitive to that. So processes, Courtney.
Yeah, so I feel like in 10 years, you're going to still be working, right, Dr. Cook?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's. I'm sure I will be in some form.
Well, you can come back and see if your prediction that audits are going to be more process-based.
I think it'll be slower, because I think we've actually been through that sort of phase I showed you of the growth of dairy farm. That was done mainly at a time when we had too much milk. Mm-hmm. And so the power was in the buyer's hands. Now we've been through it. There's been a shift. I think there's some more power associated with the industry for a time. I think it obviously waxes and wanes, but I think that the sort of rate of progress has perhaps slowed a little bit, and there's a bit of pushback from the industry about how much it's willing to do and how quickly it's willing to change. And that gets back to the social trust argument of trusting the industry to regulate itself. Yeah. It's important that it takes that seriously and does that. But I do see some of these changes probably occurring more slowly because they're complicated.
Yeah.
Because we're asking kind of difficult things. So to transition out of tie stalls completely difficult. There's a plan in place for Canada up through 2027. In the meantime, how do we fix the restriction of movement? Well, you let the cows out the barn. Mm-hmm. And so having some required untethered exercise likely will be required for tie stalls. That doesn't necessarily mean it's at pasture. It could be in a bedded pack. But that kind of approach may well be in place if we're to see tie stalls continue.
Yeah.
And many of us have moved away from tie stall housing, but it's still part of the plain sect.
Yeah.
Certain communities, the Amish communities, use tie stall housing. How do you approach that? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a difficult discussion. And if you're going to require that of tie stalls, where does it stop with free stalls? Do you require some kind of outside access for a free stall cow? I have a hard time with that, but I know certain free stalls like this one where they do let cows outside. We let cows outside during the dry period. Heifers go outside. I challenge farmers to build some outdoor access for some cows some of the time. Mm-hmm. I'd like it to be in the hands of the farmers as to when that is and how they do it, not imposing grazing on an unsuspecting industry. That would be an animal welfare disaster. Mm-hmm. But it's certainly a discussion because there's a huge expectation for consumers that
cows have outside
graze. Yeah, calves. We continue to underfeed calves milk and house them in individual pens.
Although
and we
the
know those
research-
things are potentially bad.
Yeah, all the research is pointing otherwise.
And that really is ground zero for health. Okay, we believe they do better in individual pens because we can monitor their intake and we can watch them more closely versus a group. But the science saying, actually, no, when you feed them more and put them in a group, they're healthier to a degree, because the science tends to be done on smaller groups.
Yeah.
In commercial dairies, you might find groups of 30 calves on a common feeder. That's a different game, and that's where vets go to the farm and see a disaster. Salmonella outbreaks, pneumonia, and so on. The paired raising option always seemed to me to be the sort of the compromise.
Yeah.
A lot of the benefits of being in a group with a friend, but something that we can manage in most dairy herd management systems, because what we'd need to do is just slide a panel out and just allow two calves to mix together.
Not a huge change to infrastructure.
Not a huge change, but I'm shocked how difficult it's been to see that grow in the industry.
I thought it would be when this became a more popular idea several years ago. I thought it would be more commonplace now, and it
isn't. There's pushback, and there's unequal growth, there's cross-sucking, there are issues, blind quarters, heifers coming in with blind quarters. So there are health-related things that are holding us back on pair raising, which I saw as something that I thought was going to change in the industry more. So we clearly need to learn more about how to do this and how to do it well. And then there's the big issue of cow-calf separation. When you make people aware that we take calves away at birth, it doesn't sit well with the vast majority of consumers. No. And so we've been challenged to come up with the roadmap of what science do we need, what answers do we need to make this happen in commercial dairies, because no one wants to go back to, 4 calves on a cow in a dirty bedded pack where the calf's getting scours from all the manure, because the cow makes lots of manure. It's very difficult to keep those areas clean. So we have lots of bad memories of the past with this. But
hopefully the research that's going on now will give us answers as to...
exactly. There's a pathway forward. It needs different management, different housing systems, but people are doing it. This is an example of a farm in Skara, Sweden, research dairy that's been doing it a number of years, and it's kind of fun to follow their adventures, because first year they did this, they wanted to stop. It was tough. Now they wouldn't do it any other way. And so we've kind of thought about all the different things we need to do. Imposing this on a dairy industry today would be a disaster. Telling them how to do it based on good research and knowledge, that there's a potential future where we get to do it on dairies. So this comes back to the kind of work Jennifer Van Os does and our colleagues over in CALS, our animal welfare scientists. They do the science behind this, and we've got great groups like the British Columbia Animal Welfare Program that have facilities and have systems where they can ask cows and calves what they need and what they experience to experience good behavior, where we can ask stakeholders and understand the social science behind these questions and try to come to some kind of compromise of providing what the cow really needs in a way that the consumers are accepting of. So that's our challenge with animal welfare going forward. Sometimes it's not about the science.
It's not always about science.
It's just an ethical argument, and those values sometimes just prevail because, much like our website for the Dairyland Initiative, we have to have a recommendation. Sometimes our recommendations are built on good science. Sometimes they're not. They're our best guess. But you have to have something. And in the construction of animal welfare audits, you have to make a decision of what are you going to include and what standard you're going to hold farms to. So that was just a little summary of where we've been with animal welfare, hopefully where we're going. But it's been a good journey. We've definitely seen lots of very positive improvements in our industry working from within.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this, a little bit of a history lesson, but it gives me a better understanding of how far dairy cattle welfare has come just within the past 10, 15 years, and has given me hope for the future too. So
sounds good. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, SureGain Trout Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.